The night sky was a deep shade of bruised purple, streaked with the faint afterglow of a sun that had long since dipped below the horizon. The air was thick with dust and smoke, bitter smell of burning metal and charred flesh clinging to everything like a second skin. San Antonio was a graveyard, skeletal remains of what had once been a thriving city. Now, it was nothing but twisted ruins and shattered dreams, the skyline jagged and broken against the backdrop of an alien-dominated sky. Captain Julia Ramirez crouched low behind the crumbling remnants of a concrete wall, her eyes scanning the darkness ahead. The city's familiar streets were now a maze of rubble, and the silence was punctuated by distant booms and the occasional flash of green light, telltale sign of an alien patrol scouring the area. 30 souls moved silently around her, a ragtag band of survivors made up of civilians and the last remnants of the U.S. military. The mission was simple: get to the 149th Fighter Wing National Guard base. It wasn't far, just a few miles. Every inch of ground was a potential death trap. "Move up," Ramirez whispered into her headset, voice barely more than a breath. The group advanced, slipping like shadows through the debris-strewn streets. The night was their cover, their only ally in a world turned hostile. Ramirez could feel the tension in the air, fear that clung to every man and woman in the group. She felt it too, cold knot in her stomach. She buried it deep. Fear kept you sharp, but it could also get you killed. Ahead, the outline of the National Guard base loomed, a dark silhouette against the starless sky. The base had been hit hard, but there were still supplies to be found. Ammo, food, anything to keep them fighting. They just had to get there in one piece. Flicker of movement caught Ramirez's eye. She froze, holding up a fist to signal the others to stop. Her heart pounded in her chest as she peered into the shadows. There, just ahead, a trio of alien scouts glided silently through the rubble, their insectoid bodies shimmering with an unnatural iridescence. They moved with eerie grace, their four legs barely touching the ground, while their clawed hands gripped strange, glowing weapons. Ramirez signaled to her second-in-command, Sergeant Mike Holloway, broad-shouldered man with a permanent scowl etched into his face. He nodded, raising his rifle and motioning for the others to do the same. The aliens were too close to avoid. They would have to fight. She held her breath, counting the seconds as the aliens drew nearer. With a sharp gesture, she gave the signal. Gunfire erupted into the night, a thunderous roar that shattered the uneasy quiet. First alien dropped before it could react, its chest exploding in a burst of greenish blood. The others moved with blinding speed, darting for cover and returning fire with their plasma weapons. Bolts of searing energy zipped through the air, leaving trails of glowing green in their wake. "Keep moving," Ramirez shouted over the din, firing off shots as she darted from cover to cover. They couldn't afford to get bogged down here. Every second they spent fighting was a second closer to being discovered by a larger patrol. The group pressed forward, their movements chaotic but coordinated, a desperate dance in the midst of destruction. Ramirez caught a glimpse of one of her soldiers, a young woman barely out of her teens, crumpling to the ground with a scream, a smoking hole where her shoulder had been. There was no time to stop, no time to help. The only thing to do was keep fighting. Holloway was a few paces ahead, his rifle spitting death with every squeeze of the trigger. He took down another alien, but not before a plasma bolt caught him in the side. He stumbled, swearing under his breath, stayed on his feet, firing back with grim determination. Ramirez felt the heat of a plasma bolt zip past her cheek, close enough to singe her hair. He dropped to one knee, steadied her aim, and took out the last of the alien scouts with a precise shot to the head. The creature toppled over, its weapon clattering to the ground as its glowing eyes dimmed to nothing. "Go, go, go," she barked, waving the group forward. They surged ahead, adrenaline pushing them past the pain and fear, past the exhaustion that gnawed at their bones. The base was close now, just beyond the next block. Ramirez could see the remnants of the perimeter fence, twisted and torn but still standing. Another flicker of movement. Ramirez's breath caught in her throat. This time it wasn't scouts. A larger alien patrol, 6, maybe 7 strong, emerged from the shadows, their weapons raised and ready. There was no time to retreat, no time to plan. They were too close. "Light 'em up," Holloway growled. voice ragged with pain. The night exploded into chaos. Bullets and plasma bolts crisscrossed the air, the noise deafening. Ramirez felt the shockwave of an explosion as one of the aliens lobbed a grenade, sending 2 of her people flying, their bodies lifeless before they hit the ground. She fought with everything she had, her rifle an extension of her will, her mind focused on one thing: survival. The aliens were fast, stronger, but they bled like anything else. She aimed for the weak spots, the joints, places where their armor didn't cover. One by one, the aliens fell. So did her. Every loss was a knife to the gut, but there was no time to mourn, no time to think, just fight. The last alien went down in a blaze of gunfire, body jerking violently before collapsing into a heap. The silence that followed was deafening, a sudden absence of noise almost surreal. Ramirez stood panting, her chest heaving as she surveyed the carnage. The survivors, those still standing, gathered around her, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes haunted by what they had just endured. "Check the bodies. Grab anything useful," she ordered, her voice hoarse. "We move in 2 minutes." They worked quickly, scavenging ammo, weapons, anything that could help. Holloway slumped against a piece of rubble, clutching his side, still barking orders at the others. Ramirez turned her gaze to the base, now just a few hundred yards away. They had made it this far, but the night was far from over. There would be more patrols, more fighting before they could rest, if they could rest at all. "Let's go," she said, steeling herself for what was to come. "We're not done yet." The group moved out, leaving behind the bodies of the fallen without so much as a backward glance. They couldn't afford the luxury of grief, not when survival demanded every ounce of their focus. Ramirez led the way, her rifle at the ready as they navigated the shattered streets, the base's shadowy outline drawing ever closer. They reached the edge of the runway, a vast stretch of cracked asphalt illuminated by the faint glow of distant fires. It was open ground, a dangerous expanse with no cover, but it was the fastest route to the command building. Ramirez scanned the skies, her heart pounding in her chest. The alien patrols were relentless, and they had little time before another sweep would come through. "Everyone stay low and move fast," Ramirez ordered. "We make a break for it on my mark." Group huddled together, nerves frayed, ready. Ramirez took a deep breath, listening to the silence. Then, with a sharp gesture, she signaled them forward. They sprinted across the runway, boots slapping against the pavement, breaths coming in ragged gasps. The command building loomed ahead, a monolith of concrete and steel that had taken heavy damage. The upper floors were partially collapsed, gaping holes exposing the skeletal remains of the structure within. But it was still standing, and that was all that mattered. Ramirez reached the base of the building first, ducking behind a pile of debris as she scanned the surroundings for any signs of movement. The others piled in behind her, breaths heavy, eyes wide with fear and determination. "We're here," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. One of the civilians, a man in his late 30s with a thick beard and a haunted look in his eyes, stepped forward. His name was Greg Thompson, and he had once served on this base before the invasion turned the world upside down. "There's an underground bunker beneath the command building," Thompson said, his voice low and steady. "It's not on any of the official maps, but I know where the hatch is. It should be intact." Ramirez nodded. "Lead the way." Thompson moved with purpose, leading them through the debris and into the remains of the command building. The inside was a chaotic mess, wires hanging from the ceiling, shattered glass crunching underfoot. They moved carefully, their footsteps echoing in the desolate corridors. After a few minutes, Thompson found what he was looking for. In a corner, half covered by fallen beams and rubble, was a thick steel hatch set into the floor. "This is it," Thompson said, kneeling to clear away the debris. With a grunt, he pulled the hatch open, revealing a ladder that descended into darkness. One by one, the group climbed down, the air growing cooler and mustier as they went deeper. At the bottom, they found themselves in a wide, dimly lit hallway, concrete walls reinforced with steel beams. Ramirez felt a glimmer of hope. The bunker was still sealed. They might find supplies, maybe even more survivors. They moved cautiously down the hallway, the sound of their footsteps reverberating off the walls. At the end of the corridor, a massive door loomed, heavily armed with reinforced steel and multiple locking mechanisms. It looked like it hadn't been touched since the invasion began. Thompson stepped up to the door, his brow furrowed in concentration. He punched in a series of codes on the keypad, the numbers worn from use. The door didn't budge. Tried again, then again, with the same result. Frustration etched deep lines into his face. He placed his hand on the scanner next to the keypad, hoping the biometric lock would recognize him. A red light blinked, and a cold robotic voice responded, "Access denied." "Damn it," Thompson cursed, pounding a fist against the door. Ramirez motioned for their technician, a young woman named Emily Wright, to step forward. She had been a software engineer before the invasion, and now she was their go-to for anything that required more finesse than brute force. "Emily, see what you can do," Ramirez said. Emily nodded, pulling a small device from her pack and connecting it to the keypad. Her fingers flew over the controls, her brow furrowed in concentration. The seconds ticked by, each one stretching longer than the last. Finally, the keypad beeped, and the heavy locks on the door began to disengage with a series of loud clunks. The door slowly slid open, revealing a group of soldiers on the other side, their rifles raised and aimed directly at them. "Hold your fire," Ramirez barked, raising her hands in a gesture of peace. The soldiers didn't lower their weapons, their eyes hard and suspicious. Ramirez's heart raced as she searched for a way to defuse the situation. A single shot could turn this tense standoff into a bloodbath. Before she could speak again, Thompson stepped forward, his eyes widening in recognition as he locked eyes with one of the soldiers. "Jackson?" Thompson called out, voice a mix of disbelief and relief. The soldier in question, tall man with a square jaw and a closely cropped beard, blinked in surprise. "Thompson? Holy shit, is that you?" "It's me," Thompson confirmed, lowering his rifle. "We're survivors from the city. We're not your enemy." Jackson hesitated for a moment, then lowered his weapon, signaling the others to do the same. The tension in the air dissipated, placed by a palpable sense of relief. "Damn, it's good to see a familiar face," Jackson said, stepping forward to clasp Thompson's hand. "We thought we were the only ones left." "There are more of us out there," Ramirez said, stepping into the room. "But not many. The aliens have been relentless. We're all that's left of our unit. We came here hoping to find supplies and a place to regroup." Jackson nodded, his expression somber. "You found the right place. We've been holed up here since the invasion started, about 100 of us. We've got some supplies, but it's been rough. The aliens hit us hard, and we've been cut off from the outside world." "Same here," Ramirez replied. "We've been fighting in the streets, trying to hold on to whatever scraps of territory we can. But it's a losing battle. We need to find a way to strike back. Hurt them where it counts." Jackson sighed, running a hand through his hair. "That's easier said than done. We've been trying to figure out a plan, but without air support or heavy weapons, it's been a lot of hit-and-run tactic. Still, we've managed to stay alive this long." Thompson looked around the bunker, taking in the makeshift living quarters, the tired faces of the soldiers who had been holding the line. "It's good to see we're not alone. Maybe together, we can start turning the tide." Ramirez nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. This bunker, with its resources and manpower, would be the foothold they needed. It wasn't much, but it was something. And right now, that was everything. "Let's get settled in," she said. "Then we can figure out our next move. We're not done yet, not by a long shot." The bunker, hidden beneath layers of concrete and steel, was a stark contrast to the ruined world above. It was dimly lit by emergency lights, casting long shadows across the walls, but it was secure, and for the first time in days, the survivors felt a semblance of safety. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, gun oil, and the faint metallic tang of blood, a reminder that the fight was far from over. Captain Kincaid, a tall man in his late 30s, with a chiseled jaw and piercing blue eyes, stood in the center of the main chamber, his arms crossed as he surveyed the newcomers. He had been among the first to reach the bunker when the invasion began and had quickly assumed a leadership role. Kincaid had the air of someone who had seen too much, his once bright eyes now dulled by the horrors he had witnessed. "So," Kincaid began, his voice steady and commanding, "you've been out there in the thick of it. What's the situation topside?" Ramirez stepped forward, wiping the grime from her face with the back of her hand. Bad. Aliens are swarming the city, picking off any survivors they can find. We've been running and fighting for days, but we're losing ground fast. We're hoping to regroup here, gather supplies, and figure out a way to hit back. Kincaid nodded grimly. It's the same story everywhere. We've been cut off from the rest of the country for weeks. No communication, no reinforcements. Just us, trying to hold the line. Ramirez glanced around the room, taking in the faces of the soldiers who had been holed up in the bunker. Some were huddled together in groups, quietly talking, while others cleaned their weapons or simply stared into the distance, lost in their thoughts. One soldier, a grizzled sergeant named Daniels, caught her eye. He was older than most, his hair graying at the temples, but his eyes were sharp and alert. He noticed her gaze and gave her a curt nod. "That's Sergeant Daniels," Kincaid said, following her line of sight. "He's been with me since the beginning. Tough as nails, and one of the best damn soldiers I've ever served with. He was in charge of the base's defense when the first wave hit. We managed to hold them off for a while, but once they brought in their heavy artillery, it was game over." Ramirez nodded, feeling a surge of respect for the man. "What about the others?" Kincaid pointed to a group of soldiers near the far wall, where a tall, lanky man was hunched over a table, working on a broken radio. "That's Lieutenant Harris. He was one of the comms officers. He's been trying to re-establish contact with any remaining forces. So far, nothing. The aliens knocked out most of our satellites, and what's left is being jammed." Harris looked up from his work and gave them a weary smile. "We'll get something going eventually. Just need to find a signal they're not blocking. But I'll be honest, Captain, it's not looking good." Kincaid sighed, rubbing a hand over his stubbled chin. "No, it's not. But we keep trying. That's all we can do." Ramirez took a deep breath, trying to process everything she had seen and heard. "What do we know about why they're here? What do they want?" Kincaid's expression darkened. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There's been a lot of speculation, but no solid answers. We've been cut off from the higher-ups for a while now, but before we lost contact, the consensus was that they're here to take the planet. Resources, maybe. Or maybe they just want to wipe us out. We don't know." He paused, his eyes narrowing as he recalled the events that led up to the invasion. It all started when NASA lost contact with the Voyager 1 probe. It was out in deep space, far beyond the edge of our solar system. They tried to re-establish communication, but nothing. Then, months later, the probe suddenly sent a signal back. But it wasn't the same. It was distorted, twisted, like something had hijacked it. Ramirez frowned. "What do you mean, hijacked?" Kincaid shook his head. "It's hard to explain. The signal wasn't just data, it was something else. A frequency we'd never seen before, almost like a pulse. And it wasn't just the signal that was strange. Probe itself started moving, heading back toward Earth at a speed that should have been impossible." "Impossible?" Sergeant Holloway, who had been listening quietly, echoed. "How so?" Voyager had been traveling away from Earth for decades, at a speed of around 17 kilometers per second, Kincaid explained. But after it sent that signal, it started accelerating. Fast. NASA's scientists were baffled. They calculated that it would return to Earth in a matter of months. This was unheard of. It should have taken years, centuries even, for it to cover that kind of distance. Ramirez felt a chill run down her spine. And they didn't realize it wasn't Voyager at all? "Not until it was too late," Kincaid replied grimly. "They kept trying to communicate with it to figure out what was going on. But the signal wasn't coming from Voyager. It was coming from something else, something that had latched onto it and was using it to find its way back to us." The room fell silent as the weight of Kincaid's words sank in. Probe had been the unwitting beacon, leading the invaders straight to Earth. When Voyager re-entered the solar system, NASA realized their mistake, Kincaid continued. They detected an anomaly, an object following the probe, but much larger. They tried to warn the world. By then, it was too late. The object was a mothership, first of many. It entered orbit. That's when the bombardment began. The aliens didn't waste any time, Harris added, voice bitter. They hit our defense systems hard and fast. We launched everything we had at them. Missiles, drones, fighters, but nothing worked. Their tech is light years ahead of ours. Most of our birds were swatted out of the sky before they could even get close. And the nukes? Ramirez asked, though she already knew the answer. Useless, Kincaid said flatly. We launched them at the motherships, but they intercepted them long before they could reach their targets. They must have some kind of advanced shielding or countermeasures. Hell, maybe both. All we could do was watch as they tore through our defenses like tissue paper. Ramirez clenched her fists, anger boiling in her veins. We never stood a chance. No, Kincaid agreed. But that doesn't mean we're done fighting. We may be outgunned, but we're not out yet. We've been hitting them where it hurts, taking out patrols, sabotaging their supply line. Not much, but it's something. We've still got people out there, small pockets of resistance, just like yours. If we can regroup, maybe, just maybe, we can start to turn this around. Ramirez looked around at the faces in the bunker. Soldiers, civilians, all of them battered but not broken. She saw the determination in their eyes, the fire that had kept them alive this long. They were tired, wounded, but they weren't defeated. Not yet. We'll do more than survive, she said, her voice strong and unwavering. We'll fight back. We'll make them pay for every inch of ground they've taken, and we'll send them back to whatever hell they came from. Kincaid met her gaze, flicker of hope kindling in his eyes. Damn right, we will. We've lost a lot, but we're not out of this fight. Not by a long shot. The room was silent for a moment, the weight of their situation pressing down on them, but it was a silence filled with resolve, not despair. Ramirez turned to her group, her voice steady. Get some rest while you can. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. As the soldiers and civilians began to disperse, finding places to rest or to work on their gear, Ramirez found herself alone with Kincaid. He looked at her, his expression serious. I know it's hard to see a way out of this, said quietly, but we've got to hold on to hope. If we give up now, we're finished. Ramirez nodded, her jaw set. I won't give up, not as long as there's a single person left to fight. Kincaid gave her a tight smile. Good, because we're going to need every bit of that resolve in the days ahead. The aliens may have started this war, but we're damn well going to finish it. As Ramirez walked away, the weight of the fight ahead settled on her shoulders. The invasion had been brutal, and the losses staggering. There was still a chance. A slim one, perhaps, but a chance nonetheless. And she wasn't about to let it slip away. Captain Kincaid's orders came swiftly after the initial debrief. The new mouths to feed meant that supplies would run out sooner than anticipated. And the need to find other survivors was more pressing than ever. The captain gathered a small team of seasoned scouts, their task clear. Locate any remaining survivors, secure whatever food and supplies they could find, and gather intelligence on the alien operations in the area. Ramirez insisted on joining them. I've been all over the city, he argued, her voice firm. I know the landscape, the alleyways, the places where people might be hiding. You need me out there. Kincaid studied her for a long moment, weighing the risks. Finally, he nodded. All right, Ramirez, but stay sharp. Can't afford to lose anyone else. The team consisted of 6 people: Ramirez, Lieutenant Harris, Sergeant Daniels, and 3 others. Corporal Andrews, a wiry man with a sharp eye for detail, Private Lee, a former mechanic who knew his way around alien tech, and Chavez, a civilian volunteer who had proven his worth in several firefights. They set out under the cover of night. City of San Antonio, a desolate, war-torn husk, what it once was. The streets were eerily quiet, the only sounds the distant echoes of explosions and the low hum of alien machinery. The group moved quickly and silently, sticking to the shadows and avoiding open areas. The air was thick with tension, every shadow a potential threat, every sound a possible harbinger of death. As they navigated the ruins, Ramirez kept her senses on high alert. The once familiar streets were now alien, littered with debris, craters, and the wreckage of human and alien machines. The smell of smoke and decay hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the devastation that had befallen the city. They were nearing the center of town when they spotted movement ahead. Ramirez raised a fist, signaling the group to stop. They crouched behind the remains of a toppled bus, peering through the darkness. In the distance, the Alamo Dome loomed, its once proud structure now a grim silhouette against the night sky. Look, Harris whispered, pointing toward the dome. What the hell are they doing? Ramirez followed his gaze and felt her stomach turn. Hundreds of the aliens, bugs, as the soldiers had taken to calling them, were swarming around the Alamo Dome, moving equipment and weapons inside. The bugs were insectoid in nature, their bodies encased in hard exoskeletons that gleamed under the dim light. They moved with purpose, their claws clicking on the ground as they worked to fortify the building. The team watched in grim silence as the bugs erected fences and barriers, the dome becoming a heavily fortified structure. The realization hit Ramirez like a punch to the gut. They're turning the Alamo Dome into a fortress, she muttered. Or worse. Prison, Daniel said, his voice low and bitter. Look at those fences. That's not just for defense. They're building a holding area for prisoners. The thought sent a shiver down Ramirez's spine. We need to steer clear of this place, she whispered. There's no way we can take on that many of them. The group slowly backed away, careful to remain hidden in the shadows. They circled around the Alamo Dome, moving through the side streets and alleyways to avoid detection. The tension was palpable, every nerve in their bodies on edge as they navigated the city's darkened ruins. After an hour of cautious travel, they spotted a partially destroyed Walmart in the distance. The building was half collapsed, front wall caved in, but the sign was still visible, hanging precariously above the entrance. That could be our best shot at finding supplies, Harris suggested. We need food, ammo, anything that can help. Ramirez nodded in agreement. Let's check it out. Stay sharp, and keep an eye out for bugs or survivors. They approached the building cautiously, weapons at the ready. The entrance was a gaping hole, the metal doors twisted and torn apart. Inside, the store was a chaotic mess, shelves toppled over, debris scattered everywhere. But amid the wreckage there were signs of recent activity. Footprints in the dust, a few empty cans of food, and a small fire pit near the back of the store. Someone's been here, Andrews whispered, scanning the area with his rifle. Could be survivors, Ramirez replied, motioning for the others to spread out and search. As they moved deeper into the store, they heard a faint rustling sound. Ramirez held up her hand, signaling the group to stop. The sound grew louder, and then, from behind a pile of rubble, a small group of people emerged. 3 men, a woman, and a young boy. They looked terrified, their clothes dirty and torn, their faces gaunt with hunger. Don't shoot, one of the men shouted, raising his hands in surrender. Ramirez lowered her rifle, motioning for the others to do the same. We're not here to hurt you. We're looking for survivors. The man, who appeared to be in his 40s, let out a sigh of relief. Thank God. We thought you were more of those bugs. We're human, just like you, Ramirez assured them. How long have you been here? Since the first wave hit, the man replied. We've been hiding out, scavenging what we can, but it's getting harder. The bugs are everywhere. Ramirez glanced around at the others who were already searching the store for anything useful. We've got a safe place nearby. You're welcome to come with us. The woman, who was clutching the boy protectively, looked hesitant. Are there others? Is it really safe? As safe as it gets these days, Ramirez said, trying to offer a reassuring smile. We've got food, shelter, and weapons, but we need to move fast. The survivors exchanged glances, and then the man nodded. We'll come with you. We can't stay here much longer anyway. While Ramirez and the others gathered supplies, canned food, bottled water, and a few hunting rifles they found in a locked case, Harris spoke with the new survivors, trying to gather any useful information. What do you know about the Alamo Dome? Harris asked. The man's expression darkened. We've seen what they're doing there. It's not just a fort. They're setting up cages, fences, like they're planning to hold people. We saw them bringing in humans, dragging them into the dome. We think it's some kind of prison. Ramirez felt a surge of anger. Damn it, we need to get back to base and report this. If they're capturing people, we need to figure out why. We've seen other places like that, the woman added quietly. Not as big, but similar. They're taking people alive, and we don't know why. Some say they're experimenting on them. Others think they're planning to use them for labor or something worse. We'll find out, Ramirez promised, though the weight of her words hung heavy in the air. With their supplies secured and the new survivors in tow, the group began the trek back to the bunker. The night was still dark, the city still dangerous. They moved cautiously, Every step measured, every sound analyzed for danger. Twice, they had close calls, alien patrols passing by too close for comfort, but they managed to avoid detection. As they neared the bunker, the tension began to ease, the thought of safety and rest within reach. When they finally arrived, the heavy steel door slid open, and the group hurried inside, the door sealing shut behind them. Captain Kincaid was waiting in the main chamber, his expression a mix of relief and concern as he saw them return. "Report," he said curtly, though his eyes softened when he saw the new survivors. Ramirez stepped forward, her voice steady. "We found some survivors and supplies, but we also discovered that the aliens are using the Alamo Dome as a fortress. And worse, they're turning it into a prison. They're capturing people, taking them alive. We don't know why, but it's not good." Kincaid's jaw tightened. "Damn, this changes things. We need to figure out what they're planning and how we're going to stop it." Ramirez nodded, the exhaustion of the night's mission finally catching up with her. "Whatever it is, we need to act fast. We can't let them keep taking our people." Kincaid placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression grim but determined. "Get some rest, Ramirez. We'll need you sharp for what's coming next." As Ramirez walked away, her mind raced with thoughts of the Alamo Dome and the horrors that might be unfolding within its walls. The war against the invaders was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. But one thing was certain, they would not go down without a fight. Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to see what's next for our group of survivors.